What is up, everybody? Welcome to the All-NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Mares, and I'm joined by Tim Legler. Legs, what's happening today, brother?
What's up, man? I'm just, I feel like I'm in a band. It's just like, new day, new city, got a gig tonight, just kind of resting my vocal cords, just getting ready for the night, belt out the favorites.
What role would you be in the band, do you think?
I would have to be
drummer.
No, I'm front man. I'd have to be front man. Okay, I'm sorry.
There you go. You go. Lead singer.
I've already thought about this over the years. With my group of close friends, we've had these arguments and debates, because there's 8 of us, that are pretty tight, and there's only room for 4 or 5 at most. So we always try to, assuming I'll be the front man, I have to delegate who I think would be the drummer, the bass player, the lead guitarist, that kind of thing. And we get into some pretty heated arguments over beer sometimes.
Is there one of the friends that's the roadie? You're like, sorry, man.
Oh, there's no question. There's also the one friend that I've already said, you are definitely going to be the tour manager, man. You're nowhere near the stage, but he's really good. He's really good at networking and getting deals done and everything else. But he thinks he's like lead guitarist material, and he's not.
Yeah. I love that. That's how it is with the friend group. So harsh truths from Tim Legler. That's what you get on the show. That's what you get when you're in the group chat with Legs.
No question, man.
On today's show, we're going to be previewing Game 4. Talking about what we expect from it tonight. Can the Mavs just get one? Just get one to save face and push the season into another week or not? We'll talk about that. We're also going to look at some of the most interesting teams. We kind of agreed on some, disagreed on others, but what do we think are the most interesting teams heading into free agency? And of course, interesting meaning what are the teams that have the biggest decisions or at an inflection point or something of the like. So we'll talk about all of that on today's show, but All NBA sponsored by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, Legs. This first segment as we preview is going to be presented by DraftKings. Again, promo code AllNBA. Because I'm going to tell you that the Mavs are favored tonight. You feel so hopeless. You're down 3-0. They've kind of gotten squashed every single one, but they come in, according to DraftKings, as -1 point favorites. The over-under is 211.5. They're favorites, but only by a point. So what happens, man? What do you think happens in tonight's game?
First of all, what's the basis for that? I don't understand that. So they were favored in the last game, and they were down 20. I don't understand.
Yeah,
I was going to say something.
Well, every home team gets -2 on any sports book, and that's where it draws from. So -1 is pretty much like a chalk up.
Yeah,
maybe Porzingis not there. I don't know,
but it's just I don't know what more you would need to see to think that to not feel that Boston's going to end this tonight. I expect them to end it. I again won't be shocked if Dallas wins a game. I think their team is good enough to do that. They have too many areas of the game in which they have not been their best version. Yeah. And so how do you clean up enough of those? Do you get the 3-point shooting from the role players plus the ability to defend and keep the ball in front of you, plus have Luka and Kyrie play well in the same night? Do you get all of that stuff? Because I think that's what it's going to take. And I haven't seen it to this point in the series to think that that's going to happen tonight. They could win a game. But I'm just surprised they would be favored with a team like Boston that's this good, that's playing this well right now, that clearly is going to have just sense it and smell it and want to get this over. Because I think they want to do something historic, man. And I think 16-2 is pretty historic if they can pull that off and have a clean sheet in the NBA Finals. I mean, what more emphatic statement can you make over your dominance over the league in a given year than to do that?
Yeah, game by game momentum, I think, is overstated in the regular season. there's travel. There's just too many disruptions. You're not that locked in. But I think in the
agree.
playoffs, there's something to it. I think there is like a team, and Boston is a perfect example of this, a team that has been close a few times, but not over the hump, where I think they have real momentum because they are just so supremely focused. So tonight, I mean, typically you're up 3-0, you're on the road. Yes, you can smell the champagne. It's right there. The Larry O'B's in the building, and you know that. But I think there is something with this team specifically that is like, we're not taking our foot off the gas pedal this whole season from October all the way to whenever this thing is finally done. So a lot of times I would expect a little bit of a letdown just because you don't have that sense of urgency, but I don't expect that tonight. I think Boston has proven to be zero focused in on this championship, and I think they're going to be that tonight as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And here's the thing that's interesting about this, Adam. We can't predict kind of based how the start of the game is, right? Because, Dallas just proved that last game. They couldn't have played any better the first 8 minutes of the game. And it looked like, okay, man, they're here tonight. And Kyrie at that point had already kind of gotten going. Porzingis wasn't out there. So there was something in the air about that because that length had bothered them up front. And you felt like 8 minutes in or so, like, okay, they're about to make this really interesting series because they're going to get right back in it tonight. And now we're going to be, tonight we're looking forward at a 2-1 situation in a game 4. Man, how exciting this game would have been tonight if that were the case. So you can't even predict based on the start. I mean, Boston eventually settled in and really settled in by the end of that quarter. The way that quarter ended kind of set the tone for like what was going to happen later. And then of course they hit him with the big run later, got separation. So it's like at this point I've seen Dallas play really well at the start. I've seen him play poorly at the start. It doesn't seem to matter. At the end of the day, the important possessions that have taken place, and there haven't been a ton, but the important possessions that have taken place, Dallas has shown just an inability to guard them. And I guess that's the belief that I'm lacking right now in Dallas's ability to overcome that, get a win, unless somehow they win the game by 15-18 and then guarding them in big moments won't matter. And I don't know if anybody sees that happening.
Part of me, I don't know. Sometimes that happens with a team down. So one of the questions is, does Boston lose focus, up? But the other question is, does Dallas lose hope? And hope and faith and all those things and motivation play such a big part, especially when the margins matter so much at this stage. And so there's a question of, well, does Dallas have the fight in them tonight? What exactly are you fighting for other than saving face? And I'll tell you the one guy that has a big story, and that's Luka. This was Game 3, brought as much criticism as we've seen on Luka Doncic, as much of a spotlight as we've seen on him. So he's the one guy that tonight, if there's a reason to get excited, I'll be honest with you, Legs, I'm not the most excited basketball fan in the world right now because I'm not that excited for tonight's game. But if there's one thing I'm very excited about, it's Luka Doncic, because this is a chance just to respond, at least for a game, respond. And I'm curious to see how he approaches this one. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot of different ways you can think that this is going to go for Luka. I think right now he's had a lot of negative attention, based on his demeanor and his lack of defense. Like those are the two things. No one's ever going to question his offensive ability, or anything like that. He's dominant in that area, but his demeanor, leadership, and his defense, that's what he's been attacked for. And it's, I don't care who you are or how much of an inflated opinion you have of yourself. That stings a little bit when you're getting beat up to this extent that he has been. And a lot of it tonight is going to be about people looking at him and really scrutinizing him and analyzing him. And as you start with that stuff again, 4 or 5 minutes into the game, where he's, complaining about non-calls and jogging, getting back and all that stuff. Does he get put on an island and get blown by 2-3 times in the first 6 minutes of the game? Like, I think that stuff he's self-conscious about it right now. And I'm really curious to see what his response is going to be to that. And even if they lose the game, does he comport himself better in those situations to take that into the offseason and learn from it? I'm really curious to see that. Or do you see a lot of the same stuff? They get swept. And what lingering effect does that have in terms of public perception on Luka Doncic going into the summer?
Yeah, the public perception part of it, some of it is inescapable. You could lose in Game 7 in the finals and average 50 a game. And if you lose, people are going to start criticizing you, right? There's a little bit of a microscope on you. So that I almost feel, even if he has a good game, there's going to be some residual criticisms of him should they drop the series, which I anticipate they will. But having a good bounce back from what was a very bad look in game 3, and especially a bad look from a maturity standpoint. Because the question I don't have a question if Luka Doncic can win a championship. I know he can. He's that good of a player. He has the talent. I do have a question about how much and how quickly he's going to mature in the weak areas of his sort of, basketball character / skill set or what have you. And tonight, putting effort into defense, being focused and not weighing his team down with any type of, you talking to officials will be a big part of like, okay, he got the message at least. It's in his mind and he responded to it in this one moment. So I'll be interested to see that. Is there another player you kind of want to see tonight or that you were especially interested in?
Well, I think Lively. It's all about Dallas, right? And it's all about them. So yes, Lively, top of the list. I would add, because one of the things I'm thinking about with Dallas right now is one of the things they're going to take away from this if they lose tonight, for whatever reason, and they all have different reasons. Lively, Green, Kleber, and Hardaway. Like, these are 4 guys that played significant roles for them all year that they've gotten practically nothing out of at all. Yeah. I mean, and you just can't survive that. So they have to look at each situation. Is it just because Green and Lively are really young players and Lively is dealing with some stuff off the court, losing his mom, and how much has that affected him? The Kleber thing is, he missed all that time with the injury, came back. Is that what it is? Tim Hardaway Jr. the same. They just gave up on him. They tried to throw him in there the other night. Clearly, after all that time not playing, it was a bad moment for him. 0 for 5, and like had a couple of bad plays, getting a shot blocked and just turning the ball over. He got beat a couple times defensively. Just wasn't ready. So none of those guys, like, can you go into the summer and say you're really kind of clear now about how they're going to handle that situation? Because the bottom line is they're going to expect to be in the finals again, whether it's next year or whenever. For any time in the foreseeable future, their goal every single year is going to be to get to the finals and win a championship. That's what they're going to be looking at. So if that's the case, I just worry that has there been questions that have arisen here right at the end that they didn't have going into this series. That's what's going to be interesting to me for Dallas and how they view their supporting cast. Because clearly you're not doing anything with Luka and Kyrie. We already talked about Luka, what needs to change. Look, Kyrie didn't play well for 2 games. I think they know who Kyrie Irving is, and they're very happy with what he did for them this year and the way he carried himself and how engaged he was. And his relationship with Luka has really grown. So I think they're good there. I think looking up and down the rest of that roster, some things I think they thought they were pretty sure about, they can't be sure about after this series if things continue to go this way and they lose tonight. And that, to me, is what I'm taking out of this series more than anything else, is what about Dallas's supporting cast? What are they going to do? And looking at that, and is that going to be good enough to run it back and get back here next year with the same group?
It's one of the things I love about the playoffs is you often don't know what your role players are and are not until they get put in the pressure situations. And, obviously they're in the finals, so they've been in a lot of pressure situations and looked very, very good. But it is one of those things where the deeper you go, okay, at a certain level or against a certain type of defense or offense, this player has a weakness and we have to address it one way or another. The only other storyline I find compelling tonight, and I actually think it's a good one. Finals MVP is still a little bit up for grabs, even though Jaylen Brown has taken a pretty commanding lead, minus 360 on DraftKings, Jason Tatum plus 260. Is it a wrap, or could Game 4, if Boston were to win Game 4, is there still a path where Tatum could win the Finals MVP just because he was so good in this specific game?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's still alive. I mean, I think Jaylen Brown, it's a situation now. You're coming down the home stretch here, and Jaylen Brown's got a 1-length lead, right, if these are horses. And I think what would have to happen would be Jaylen Brown just has a horrible shooting night. And I don't know if any of us expect that. Because he gets to his spots, because he's not like he's just shooting a bunch of contested deep jumpers. He's got mid-range. He's getting to the rim, right? He gets out and scores in transition. So you think he's going to get enough opportunities close to the rim that are high-quality shots that he'll convert. But let's just say it happens to guys. I mean, you could have a 4 for 17 night. On the same night, Jason Tatum goes 12 for 19 with 32, and Jaylen Brown has 14 points. Because that thing, Tatum typically is going to be a better rebounder most nights. So if he throws a 30-plus point game out there with a double-digit rebound game, and Jaylen Brown has one of those nights where he really struggles, that's going to really tighten it up. I'm not saying Jaylen Brown couldn't still win it in that scenario. All I'm saying is at that point, it's really a pick-em between the two of those guys. if Jaylen Brown has an average to above average game, no matter what Jason Tatum does, I think Jaylen Brown wins it.
Yeah. I think so. If you look at it, Jaylen Brown's averaging 3 more points per game, and he's also leading in steals and blocks, averaging 2 steals a game, 1.5 blocks. In rebounds and assists, though, Tatum has a commanding lead there. So it's one of those things where I think Jaylen Brown, it might be more than a horse's length or whatever it is. I think it might be a little bit more than that. That being said, Tatum is close enough that a big time performance tonight from him that just bumps all the averages up, will probably make a big impact on it. The thing I wonder though is
real quick to your point, I don't have the raw numbers in front of me. It looks like you do. So you're saying has Brown scored 9 more points in this series?
No. 24 to 22, basically. I mean, it's not that much more points.
So that's my
2
point.
Points, 2 points. Only 2 points per. Oh, yeah, 6 total. I got you.
Yeah,
yep.
So I mean, 6 total points. So my point being, if Jason Tatum outscores him tonight by 12 points or something, right. And so at the end of it, he has a higher scoring average, more rebounds, more assists. I think there's always going to be kind of an edge, I think, for Brown defensively, but still, I think that could tilt it, man, in his direction. So we'll see. I do think you're right. I do think it's still up for grabs. I think if Jaylen Brown, has a solid game, it's going to take Jason Tatum having, I think, a great game to take it.
Very memorable. Yeah. Very exactly memorable game.
And especially if this is a tight game and one of those two guys makes a big shot to decide it to get this team a title, there's a lot at stake. It's going to be that part of it is also going to be fun and interesting to watch as well tonight, the two of them and what happens. And, look, for all of us, for just fans of the game, it would be great to get us to a Monday night, man. You know what I mean? Because number one, the energy is always better when you're watching the game when the team closes at home.
Yeah, it's true.
It's just a cool thing to watch as a fan, right? And then also, obviously, you just get more drama. I don't think that Boston would be feeling any sort of anxiety if it's now 3-1 going back to Boston with 2 of the 3 remaining at home. They'd be a very comfortable, secure place, but at least they'd feel a little something, as opposed to, getting swept where this ended up being a relatively boring NBA Finals. I think from a fan standpoint, I'm sure the Boston fans would disagree with that. They want this over with, but I think everybody else, you just want to see more basketball. So let's see what Dallas brings, man. I'm really curious to see, not necessarily their energy at the start. I think that will be there. I'm certain it will be there. I'm curious what happens when Boston hits them with a run, a 10-0 run. That's when the weight of all of this could cause a team to collapse. I've seen it happen in this exact situation before. You're fine in the beginning, and then here it is. It's 38 all. Next thing you know, it's 51-38. What happens then? And how does Dallas, what's their body language look like? And how much do they just go, you know what, it's over? And even though you don't overtly quit, you kind of subconsciously do. And let's see. That's what I want to see. There's going to be adversity at some point in this game. And how does Dallas react to it? They've come back twice. I don't know if they'll do it a third time.
So what is your pick for tonight? If you were just do you think Boston does close it out? My
gut saying Boston ends it tonight. Yeah. I think they have a very professional approach to all of this, man. And I think just even listening to their sound and knowing these guys, and you don't take anything for granted. I think they also realize, man, that the dangerous threat that Luka and Kyrie do represent still. And if you don't put them away, when you get an opportunity to put them away, they're two guys, man, on a given night can be so good that, they can win anywhere at any time. So I think they feel that sense of urgency will still be there for Boston, and they want to get this thing over with, man, and cement their place in Boston history.
Well, there you go. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we're going to talk about the teams that we think are most interesting. I mean, free agency, the draft, all these things coming up in the next 2-3 weeks. Once the season ends, the finals end, it's a downhill race to the offseason. So we're going to talk about teams that we think have some interesting decisions to make here in the next 2 or 3 weeks on the other side. But first, fellas, blink if you haven't purchased a Father's Day gift just yet. That's right. We thought so. Probably everybody right now is blinking. Today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the leader in below-the-waist grooming. Maybe your pops has had a bush since the 70s, and that's okay. Our friends at Manscaped have crafted the total package for his special day, whether it's for the boys downstairs, his beard, or even the best pair of underwear out there. Manscaped has his bases covered. Head over to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping with code ALLNBA. That's ALLNBA. And of course, they have all types of products. It's not just the below the belt grooming. They've also got the nose trimmer. Like I said, they got the boxers. They've got travel packages and a bunch of different things for all of your men's grooming needs. And it does make a good gift if that's what you're thinking of. So get 20% off plus free shipping with the code ALLNBA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with a free shipping at manscaped.com when you use the code ALLNBA. Never forget where you came from, if you know what I mean. Happy Father's Day from Manscaped. Also want to tell you about DraftKings Sportsbook, the presenting sponsor. We told you those lines. -1 for the Mavs. If you feel as I do that the Celtics are going to win, well, you can at least, even if you're a sad Mavs fan, you can at least make money on your own misery, which is one thing I like to do, the emotional hedge. Bet against your team, so if they win, you're happy. And if they lose, at least you make a little bit of money. Over on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. You got same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts. If you're like me and only like to bet or primarily like to bet on basketball, might be the last day for quite a while for you to bet on them. So head on over. You get the odds boost as well. Don't miss out on all of this postseason action. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers get $5 whenever they place a $150 bet, or I'm sorry, they get a $150 bonus bet instantly whenever you make a bet of $5. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use that code ALLNBA. That's code ALLNBA for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets with just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/bball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
All right, back here on the All-NBA show, guys, as we're winding down season 1 of this show. We appreciate everybody that has joined and made this a part of your daily regimen. We've been a lot of regulars, in the chat, in the comment section, or just reaching out on social media, and we appreciate the people that make this a regular thing for them. We've enjoyed doing it. Legs, let's get into the offseason, though, now, and we're talking about most interesting teams. One of the teams we agreed on had an interesting offseason is the San Antonio Spurs. And the reason for me that they're interesting is they have a player in Victor Wembanyama that typically, even if you have the best rookie by a mile, usually it's like, all right, this is a 3-year thing, slow build, and let's start competing in a couple years. But I watched Wembanyama this year, and I thought if he had a good team around him, he would be a great player on a great team. San Antonio has a choice to make. Do they want to start to go all in and start to push their chips forward? They've been rumored, DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, different players. So why are they interesting to you? And do you think that they should or will make a move to sort of speed up the timeline?
Interesting to me, Adam, because I'm just curious to see how fast they want to expedite this. That's the thing. I've heard rumors out there that they're talking about trying to become more, competitive next year. That's a lot when you look at their roster. I mean, as great as he is, and his numbers really eye-popping this year, man. He only played 29 minutes a game. 29 minutes, and he averaged 21, almost 11 boards, 4 assists, almost 4 blocks, 1.2 steals in 29 minutes. Most of those minutes were not in competitive environment. Right. So, okay, that's great. He got his feet wet, and I thought they did a great job as the year went on, and he did. I don't know if I want to call it development because I think it's always been there, but he got more comfortable with himself. He got more comfortable with his strength, and he got more assertive and scoring on different areas of the floor, holding his position better, all of that. I thought in the beginning of the year, they did everything they could to deflect attention from him by literally running anything for him for the first month of the season. And I think that was by design that Popovich was doing that. As the year went on, that changed. So we were just, we kept doing the Victor Wembanyama check-ins. We do one of those shows every few weeks, and it was just we continued to just kept raving about this guy. We know what the ceiling is for him. It's unlimited what this guy could be. Their roster isn't close to being competitive in the Western Conference. So what would it take? Like, you can't do it all in one summer. So it's like, where do you target? For me, I think they need, and again, we're not going to get into specific names here today,
Yeah.
because it just gets you off
Too
course,
messy.
because it's you're just literally pulling stuff out of thin air. And so let's just talk about ideologically, what do they need? I think they need a proven veteran point guard as a starting point guard. I think Trey Jones is a really good player. I think Trey Jones is a backup on a really good team. You need a starting veteran point guard, and a guy that can carry a little bit more to scoring burden for him, and a guy that can make the game easier for Victor Wembanyama. That would be the priority one for me. They've got a couple of wings that are decent players. Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. Those guys are nice young players. But that's not close to being good enough to compete with the top tier in the Western Conference. So how fast do they want to get there, Adam? And what do you think is the first thing they need to add? Like, what position or what type of player?
Well, I'm curious if you think with a player like Wembanyama, you start to think about big two. In today's NBA, I don't think it's big threes anymore. I think it's like you have a guy and a running mate. And Victor Wembanyama is going to be the guy, but that means you pair him with a ball handler, right? You're going to give him somebody most likely to run pick and roll, pick and pop, and different things. So I look at that. That's where you start, and you say, okay, do you start the clock now? Because chemistry is a part of the NBA. Your two players need to start earning reps. So to me, I think that's a big part of it. Is he's good enough right now that if you had a good team, if he was the second best player on a team that had 5 really good players and some role players, that team to me is like already, you're talking about being good enough or close to good enough. So now the question is, do you want to start the clock on that? Do you want to try to identify who is his running mate? Or is that the thing that you have to be more selective on and say, we'll try to find one this year, but we're not going to get the wrong guy. We'll wait. And if it takes 2-3 years to find that guy, we're okay.
I don't have it in front of me either. Do you know this? Do they have their own draft pick?
Oh, man, I should pull this up. I'm guessing that they do. I know Bobby Marks has this.
Look, I know it's a weak draft. And it's too early for me with the finals going on. And I'll be doing some draft coverage for ESPN. I dive into that stuff like that last week before the draft. We're not there yet, so I haven't focused on it. I just know that it's a weak draft. Right. By some accounts, one of the weakest we've seen, maybe ever. So I don't know. And depending if they have their own pick or not, where they finished, and with the lottery, you could end up with, like, I guess a top 3 pick, probably, right? Top 3, top 4.
They've got the 4. They've got the 4th pick.
4th pick. So I don't know if, and again, if let's say there was a point guard.
I'm sorry. 5th pick. They have the 5th pick. Okay. They have their own. Ooh, actually, it looks like they have a lot. Draft picks in June.
Lottery picks. Somebody just
in the 5 and 8. They have number 5, number 8, number 35, and number 48. So they've got 4 picks in this draft. 2 of them are.
It's a terrible year to have. It's a terrible year to have the 5 and the 8 by all accounts, just based on what's up there. But that's the beauty of the eye of the beholder. They've always been an organization that has drafted really well. So let's see what they're looking at. But again, even if you drafted the positions we're talking about, that's a few years away probably before those guys would be the type of impactful lead guards that we're talking about. So I think you're more likely to try to look at the trade market or the free agency market. But I think that's just so important to go beside him right now. I think they have to upgrade that. I personally don't see them being in the mix next year. Like, I don't think they're going to be like a play-in team.
Well, that's because they're going to have to make too many moves. Yeah, that's like multiple
too much
things
in one year. But let's see what they win 22 games. Can they win 30 games? Can you win 28, 30 games? They're going to have to add a couple of better pieces than they have now to even do that, in my opinion. So that they are interesting to me just because they've got this player that we all know he's going to be and the impact on the league that he is going to ultimately have. How fast do they want to try to get there? And in a draft like that's this week, to have 2 picks that high, do they, what do they do? Do they package those for a future draft? Like what's the plan internally? I really would love to be a fly on the wall to hear those conversations.
And they could throw a wrench in the system because they are one of those teams that could become more aggressive right now, and then they're competing with the teams that think title window's already open. So, or they could stand pat and not be a player in it. So they will be an interesting one. And I would not be surprised if we're looking at some of the moves they make this offseason and going, man, that's very interesting. They might be something. The next team we have on our list here, actually, this is the team that's maybe number 1 for me personally, and that's the Pelicans. My Pelicans, who I absolutely love talking about more than I like watching them often. But here's the thing. I think they're almost certainly trading Brandon Ingram this offseason. I just don't think you can talk yourself into a Zion Ingram duo anymore. And that it's expired to me, especially with how the year ended and some of the things that happened with Ingram getting benched late in key games. So I look at that and I go, okay, I think he's out the door. That alone makes them fascinating. But here's the thing. Whatever they trade him for, they have to nail it. You cannot find yourself in the play-in again or in the 7-8 seed. At some point, you've had Zion long enough to say we should have been making progress. So to me, I think David Griffin is on the hook this summer to make a big move with Brandon Ingram and to make the right one. And that's why I think it's fascinating, because there's a lot of possibilities there.
100% agree. And look, Brandon Ingram, he's tantalizing for other teams too, because he's a 6'11" wing that handles the ball and gets his own shot. Now, hasn't been the most reliable. He's had injury issues, and he finished the year in a 4-game series. Not only the situation you're talking about where he was benched for a game at the end of the game and sat there pouting while his team made a comeback. Not only did that happen, he shot 34% in the series.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about finishing on a bad note, but it doesn't mean that the talent isn't still there. And he's still, young enough that you think he's got some good years in him, and he could be a piece, man, for somebody that's much closer and better to go after. I completely agree with you. I think that that's what's going to happen with this team. I also have a question for you. How are you feeling right now about the arc of CJ McCollum's career and like where he is right now?
This is such a good question, because for me, I think he was a very good addition to them. They needed a veteran that I think brought some professionalism to some of the guys, though it did not clearly make its way. I think it made its way to the guys below CJ McCollum, but not necessarily to the guys above CJ McCollum, namely Zion and Ingram. But in the lack of leadership in those two guys, I think CJ provided a great amount of that. But as I mentioned, your hope was that was a very useful trade over the last year and a half, but should become less useful as your team matures. So to me, he's a good player. They should be further than where they are, which means they should no longer need him to the degree they do. But the fact that they haven't made enough progress there from their key guys makes me think that he's still kind of important as the veteran presence, even if I think he's below the standard of what's going to ultimately get them over the hump to become a contender.
I agree with that. And when I loved CJ McCollum's game, and I loved him in Portland, and when they got him, and I, he was a guy that I would say when he was playing next to Lillard as a combo guard, more like an off guard with Lillard. And I would say, man, CJ McCollum ever gets his own team. And this is a guy I think that can average like 24 and close to 10 assists. Like I just believed in him to that extent. Maybe I was a little bit high on the playmaking aspect of that. I think he's more of a scorer at heart. He had a decent year for them. He averaged 20 points a game on 46% shooting, 43 from the three, 4 boards, 4.5 assists. Like that's a solid year. He did not play well in the playoffs. And here's a big issue for CJ McCollum. He missed 16 games this year. He only missed 7 last year. Year before that, 20. The year before that, 35. I mean, so this is now like a pattern. He had a solid run in Portland where he went 80, 80, 81, 70, 70. 5 years in a row, but that hasn't been the case 3 out of the last 4 seasons. So you wonder, is this something also where you're going to have to accept every year now going forward? He's missing 20, 25 games or more. That's something to weigh in. He's only 32, but these things start to take a cumulative effect on you. And so I'm looking at him now and I'm saying, I think almost like he's better off being back in that role as the secondary guy rather than that lead ball handler that was so crafty and good using ball screen and a great mid-range pull-up jump shooter. I don't know, especially if you don't have Ingram, I think you need maybe another more explosive wing player or guard, point guard, whatever, that can handle the ball and get his own shots. I think I'm a little bit concerned right now as we sit here about what my expectations are going to be for the Pelicans going forward. Zion. Yeah. Exactly.
This is why they're the most interesting team, because you could see them making a good move this offseason, and all of a sudden it's like next year, are they winning around? Are they a threat? Are they like a Pacers where they could surprise everybody and rise to, this top? But you could also see it not working out and it being, is it time to trade Zion? This time next year, is this whole era over with this core? You could see both options.
You know what's bizarre, Adam? Most of these teams we're going to talk about, and then just in general, because a lot of these teams, we wouldn't be talking about these teams if they weren't kind of relevant for one reason or another, either because they're good and they're in the mix, or in the case of the Spurs, because they've got this incredible player. They're relevant and interesting. But most of these teams, what we're going to be talking about is how do you improve the margins around the stars?
Yeah.
With the Pelicans, I love their role players.
Yeah, I know.
Like I'm more concerned about their star players.
Yeah.
Like that's where we are with them. And that's what makes them such an interesting discussion.
Yeah. And by the way, they're role players. They have so many of them that you can do interesting things with them as well. Like Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, like they have a lot of guys that if you lost one, you still have a really good supporting cast. So if you had to lose one in addition to a CJ or addition to an Ingram to bring in another star, like they're a rare example of a team that has the depth of role players to be able to suffer if they lost one or maybe even two. The next team, and because I always have to make you talk about my team whenever I can, and I have to sneak it in when I can get it, but the Denver Nuggets have an interesting one for three reasons, really. Number one, KCP is a free agent. He has a player option. Almost certainly he'll decline it and get a longer-term deal, a huge demanding player. If Denver lost him, they've had this great starting lineup, and he's been such a great two-way fit for them. But if they sign him, they'll be a second apron team. They'll have all of these restrictions on what they can do after that, meaning they're basically just going to say, we're running it back, no changes if they end up signing him. If they lose him, though, they might, you only get a couple things. I mean, MLE, you replace him with a lesser player, you lose some depth. So I'm curious what you think. How important is it for Denver to sign KCP, and is it worth going into that second apron and completely hamstringing your ability to make any other moves?
I think it depends for me on Christian Braun's ability to extend his range and add shooting consistency from the 3-point line. If you feel like that's something he can do you not, I'll ask you watch this team more than anybody, do you not feel like he would be a pretty good replacement for KCP if you wanted to go that route and KCP wasn't with you? That Christian Braun at some point, you're going to have to see if this guy can sink or swim with more minutes, more playing time, rather than just an energy type role player that comes in. But be a guy, because he's big and strong. I think he's a pretty athletic defender. I think that end of the floor, I don't think it's like a terrible drop off. The question for him is like he's not a good enough 3-point shooter right now to eat up those minutes when you have to space off of Murray and Jokic. They need that guy to be more consistent. I'm just looking at the numbers from a year ago, and it wasn't like KCP. Well, I'm looking at these are playoff numbers. Let me go to the regular season and look at these numbers. So for KCP in the regular season, 31 minutes a game, 10 points a game, 41% basically from the three. Christian Braun shot 38%, but he took half as many shots. Yeah. He only takes 2 a game. So do you think if he extends that out to 4 or 5 a game, can he be a 40% 3-point shooter? Because there's a lot of other things he does as a slasher that KCP can't do. And he's a pretty good defender. So that might be where you go if it becomes a situation for you and you're worried about losing KCP. And then you got to obviously go and you got to replace what Christian Braun does for you on the bench, which I'm sure they're going to be looking at their bench anyway.
Right. Well, that's the thing for me is, number one, I think he can shoot well. Like if he told me he shot 40% next year, he's a hard worker. His shot has improved. I would be a little surprised, but not blown away. The thing is, I don't think defenses will guard him that way. Like part of the value of KCP is, he'll make the open corner three. So you guard him closely and it opens up the paint. With Christian Braun, it might be more of a thing that teams just say, well, are you going to give him 8 threes? Are you going to give him 9, 10 threes? Like you don't want to do that as an offense, and they'll live with it. But the other part of this is, this year Denver had both guys. They had KCP and Christian Braun. If you lost KCP, even if Christian Braun is able to replace him, the question becomes who replaces Christian Braun? Like what's the pipeline behind there? And that's why I think that for me personally, I think that Denver is close. This year, they ran into some injuries. I think they lost, they weren't up to the challenge this year, but I think that fully healthy, they were as good, could have competed with it. So I think that you shouldn't overcorrect. The second apron is very scary. I think Denver is going to have to go into it once or twice over the next 3-4 years. And this is probably a year they have to go into it and go from there. The other question you have for them though, Legs, and I'm so curious what you think of this one. Jamal Murray is max contract eligible this summer for a max
Man.
contract extension. That extension would pay him $46.5 million a year. He's never made an All-Star game. He's only averaged 25 points per game for a month like 4 times, not that many times. But obviously in the playoffs, he's had two huge runs, 2 of them. So I don't know. Is he a guy that you would feel comfortable saying the entirety of Jokic's career, we're paying this guy a max?
I'm not comfortable with very many guys that aren't the best player on their team getting that kind of money. That's just go around the league, and I'd probably feel that way. But particularly some of the things that you saw out of him this year, and even some of the struggles he had in the postseason at important times. That's a really difficult question. The one thing I will say is there's an added layer to this with him and his connection to Jokic and the way that they play, and you know that it's a fit. And that's, so you're sitting there thinking about, okay, if not him, then who? And is that, you don't know if that would be a great fit with Jokic because Jokic plays a certain style. And I'm not saying like he doesn't make guys better. That would be a hard thing to do, but it's still an adjustment for a guard to play with a big man that handles the ball that much. And Jamal Murray seems to have figured that out, or he's pretty comfortable playing that way. So that's the component, like that's what they're going to be trying to weigh. Like there's something about the familiarity of these two that would probably make Denver feel comfortable given that kind of money, but there's probably also something that makes them very uncomfortable about the fact that they're probably a little bit concerned more about his health and being able to stay healthy. And then the way he played in the postseason, and he was injured during that too. Yeah. And that really hurt them and really kind of affected their ability to win that series with Minnesota. So this is a tough one. That's one of the tougher calls in the league, in my opinion. Can I ask you one question real quick about something else real quick about 2 guys?
Yeah.
I'm just curious to get your thoughts because I think it's a big summer for Peyton Watson.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about Julian Strawther? Is he somebody that you see being someone they're interested in, invested in, potentially having a solid place in the rotation? Because that guy can score. Yeah. And Peyton Watson can really defend. And he's a little bit more streaky with his scoring, but there's 2 other young players sitting there. When you're talking about, the loss of a KCP, maybe you elevate Christian Brown, then what happens to replace KCP? What do you see in those 2 guys? And how interested and invested are the Denver Nuggets in both players?
Well, unfortunately, when you say the Denver Nuggets, the front office, I think, really believes in those guys. And all of the messaging has been about how we're putting these guys out there. We're going to have to suffer through some minutes with them, but we're going to grow them because they can be great players. But, Peyton Watson played very much a bench role, did not play a lot of minutes with starters, which is, I think, if you want to develop a guy playing with Jokic, that's how you get a guy to really learn how to play the game and play off him. So to me, I think the organization is very invested in him, but I think he's behind schedule for development for reasons that are not entirely his own. And then with Julian Strawther, he had an unfortunate injury that took him out. He had some momentum this year, got injured at a tough time so that by the time he was back, it was go time. It's prep for the playoffs time. I'm a little more mixed on him. He can shoot the ball. He's got great size, great length. He's got a little bit of an in-between game. But to me, he was inefficient this year. And whenever you watch a guy and go, that guy looks good, and then you look at the numbers, there's a disconnect there. So he's a guy that I think could go either way. I'm not ready to say I have faith in him, but he does have a skill set that I like. And I think the plan, honestly, Legs, is that they're not going to replace with veteran players. I think they're going to force Michael Malone's hand and say, Julian Strawther's ready. Play him 2,000 minutes this year. He'll be ready by the playoffs. And we'll see how it goes. The next team on our list is the Lakers. This is an interesting one because they don't have a coach at the moment. Possibly adding JJ Redick over the weekend. He's interviewing. They're doing some of this stuff. They've had the whole fiasco. But also, Legs, here's the big thing. Are they good enough? The Lakers get a lot of our breath throughout the year, a lot of our attention because they got LeBron, they've got the brand name and everything else. But I just think, are they a coach and maybe a couple moves on the margins away? Or is it, in your opinion, one of those things where you would be shocked if you built a contender given the resources available to them right now?
It was so funny. I had this conversation the other day on Get Up with Greeny, who was, Greeny was funny, Mike Greenberg, because at the end of the year, he wanted the Lakers to tank the last game of the season to avoid the Denver Nuggets. And he was like adamant about it. And of course, everybody thought, man, you can't ask professional athletes to lay down a tank a game, whatever. So everybody attacked him over that. He insists to this day he was right about that. It's really an interesting take. But then, since then he said how close they were. They're so close. And we're like, Like, look at how the series went with them. At the end of the day, they weren't winning those games. They were close in every game. I said, Greeny, listen to this. They lost to Denver, who then lost to another team, who were then beaten by another team. I said, this is what if that's your definition of close. I said, I think you and I have different definitions of it. And we had a good laugh over that. But that's my point with this is like, no, I don't think they're close. And I don't think they're going to be close. One of the reasons is because, and I know AD had a relatively healthy year. He played, I think 75, 76 games, whatever it was. It's great. That's an anomaly for him. My bet would be he goes back to 65, 68 this year. LeBron is going to be 40. He's not going to be playing more games. He's going to be playing less games. He's playing less minutes. And that means, again, coming from some position, 7 through 10 in the Western Conference and trying to figure it out at the end on the fly and go beat really good teams that are younger, that have top talent, that's better right now, that's younger also. And I just think, no, they're not close. And that's why there's a lot of debate about, the quality of the job. It's still a prestigious job, but is it a good job? And I think that's where this whole coaching search is interesting. I think that with a guy like Hurley and even a guy like JJ, because he's younger, I think they're thinking about beyond LeBron with this guy, whoever they hire. Whereas the last guys they've hired, and there's been a lot of them, 8 coaches in 14 years. There's been a lot of guys where it's like, we'll give you a window of a year and a half. Does it look like we're going to win it? No. Okay, you're out. Let's go on to the next guy. And certainly since LeBron's been there, that's been the case. This hire is going to feel different. I think they're expecting life beyond LeBron, but I don't think that they're going to have a chance to compete while he's still playing in the next couple of years.
I don't think LeBron's going anywhere, but it's just in an offseason, sometimes things happen. The Hurley thing was already weird. Like I wouldn't have expected that to happen. And maybe 1 or 2 more unexpected things. And maybe we end up arriving there. Stranger things have happened. The next team I want to talk about, the Sixers. They're another candidate for most interesting offseason. What do you see in the Sixers?
Yeah, man, because again, unfortunately, you're coming into this offseason and you're trying to evaluate how your season ended based on how incomplete they were with the timing of Embiid's injury. Right. And they're coming back and they lose that series to the Knicks. And how talented the guy is. And Maxey clearly took a massive step forward this year. But the health is always going to be a major concern for Joel Embiid. It's almost at the point where you just almost assume he's not going to be right at the most important time of the year. And so how does that affect the rest of your thinking? Finally, Tobias Harris is off the books. And that's something that all the fans of Philadelphia have been waiting for a few years.
Everybody's off the books, honestly, besides Embiid. I mean, they're a team that has an enormous amount of cap space. So they can get crazy. And Daryl Morey likes to get crazy.
And they're going to max out. They have enough money to max out Maxey, which they will, and sign a max player.
Right.
So that's going to be interesting. If you get a max player, whoever that may be on the free agent market, to go with Maxey and Embiid, that's a team absolutely is in the mix to, compete with the Boston Celtics for the Eastern Conference crown next year.
This is an era where I think that some level of continuity is going to become more and more important. You're going to see teams try to build multi-year arcs, but the 76ers are a team that is poised to have a near completely different roster next year. Tyrese Maxey, Embiid, that's the cornerstone. They're back. After that, you look around and go, I don't know, man, they could go any direction with the rest of it. So they're definitely fascinating. And then, there's been big names connected to them. Jimmy Butler, Paul George, even a Miles Bridges, they have the capacity to make a move to bring in big name players. And that's why I think they're so fascinating. You wanted to add the Pacers here. We got 2 more. Pacers. Why are they so interesting? They weren't on my list.
They made a big move already by acquiring Siakam.
Yeah.
And look, this was a team that made a run to the conference finals, unexpectedly, I think surprised people. I liked them all year, but that was obviously an unexpected run. And the Eastern Conference was sort of decimated with injuries, and it paved a way for them to be able to do it. And they did it. So now you say, well, what's the next step for this team? I think that, they're a team that looked at their team. They looked at Nembhard in the postseason. I think they realized, man, they've got a guy that's really, really talented, maybe more talented than they realized. You've got Benedict Mathurin, who missed the postseason because of the injury. He's coming back. I think when you have a run like they had, and you think to yourself, we're closer than we thought, And so now what do you do to improve those margins for that team? And I think it's a lot more important for what Indiana does than we would have thought a couple months ago because of how they finished the season and how fun their style of play is and how hard to guard. So I'm just really curious to see. They've got some fringe guys there that you feel like, do they replicate each other? Are they too similar? They've got some younger guys too, by the way, sitting on the bench. Walker is a guy that, Isaiah Jackson, like these are guys that are like younger guys that fill spots. How do you compare them to the veteran players that are playing in front of them? And does that affect what you do in terms of making moves? So I'm just very curious to see what their offseason looks like just because of the way their season ended and the fact that the Indiana Pacers go into next year being in the mix, and we didn't think they were in the mix at the start of this year.
Is Mathurin a guy that moves the needle in a trade? Because as we game theory this out, you're right. I love Ben Shepherd. He's going to be on my guys list next year. We talked about both liking Nembhard. TJ McConnell's there. If he was traded, like, okay, he has value, but what kind of value would he have to none of these like fringe contenders? He a guy that could actually change the way you look at the title race if he landed on the right spot.
You talking about Mathurin?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I like Mathurin a lot. He was one of my favorite players coming out of that draft. Right. He's gotten better. I feel like virtually every month he just continues to get better and better. He's got a strong body. He's got great bounce. He's improving his consistency with the shooting. I think he's got the upside of a probably consistent 18 to 20 point scorer in this league. I don't know he's ever going to be like a star. He's not going to be somebody you build a team around. But as a guy that's a big time scorer with a couple other guys around him that are like top tier talents, and he's your third guy, I think he could fall into that bill. And he competes defensively because he's got the strength to do it. So this was a big step forward for him. It's unfortunate he ended up with that injury and took him out of the postseason to see what he really could do. But yes, I'm a big Ben Mathurin fan. And your boy Shepherd, I liked a lot too. I did not like the way he shot the ball for them at the end of the year in the playoffs. He did not look very sure of himself at all. So when that happens, for me, I know they're young players, so you don't pass judgment, but it's also, you think you know who they are, but then you go, okay, now wait a second now, because you don't know if that's a one-off or is that going to be a trend, right. With the shooting under pressure, because he had some really, really good looks. They weren't guarding him a lot in that series, and he just was unable to convert.
The other team that you had on your list that I did not, although I certainly see why you have this team, is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They do have some decisions to make, and I'm guessing the reason you have them on this list is they waited to, let's keep the team together. We'll make moves in the offseason. But they probably have enough data points to know what they want, what direction they want to go. So what is that the reason why you have them so interesting?
Yeah, just look at the year they had, number one seed in the Western Conference. Everybody universally loves this team. They're so young, the core. But at the same time, I think you have to be honest about how much more upside is there to the guys around Shea. What do you think that is? How good do you think Jalen Williams can be? We both love him, but how much better can Jalen Williams be than he is now? How much better do you think Chet Holmgren can be than he is now? To me, that's what you're looking at. If you think they're both going to take a massive, like a big leap forward this year, and I'm not talking about like be the same as they were, that's not going to be good enough, I don't think, in the Western Conference. I'm talking about, can Chet Holmgren like add to his scoring average? Can he just add something to his game offensively that makes him a little bit more? Can he take his scoring average up to the, where he's a 23-point scorer? Like, can he do that at that consistency? Because if you believe that, then maybe you're okay with some of the other guys that you have. But if you don't know about that, I think you need to also improve your rotational depth over what they have now. And I think you saw that in the Western Conference playoffs and how that played out.
I think the guy is giddy for them. I think that's the guy that is trade $500,000 year after million early contract. So I do have 1 million draft picks, right? So they have a ton of. To me, Chet, I know overwhelming in his playoffs, but I